Welcome to War Bios, the podcast where we delve into the most pivotal battles in history, and I'm your host, General Biography. Today, we're going to explore one of the most decisive clashes of World War II, the Battle of Kursk, a confrontation that would prove to be a turning point on the Eastern Front. The summer of 1943 saw the German Wehrmacht, led by Adolf Hitler's strategic vision, launch a massive offensive against the Soviet Red Army in an attempt to regain the initiative and crush the Soviet Union's will to resist. But the Soviets, under the leadership of General Georgy Zhukov, had other plans. The German invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, launched in June 1941, had initially caught the Soviets off guard, with the Wehrmacht making significant gains deep into Soviet territory. The vast expanses of Russian land, the endless steppes, and the dense forests seemed to swallow up the German army, but they pressed on, driven by Hitler's ambition to conquer the East. This crushing defeat not only resulted in the loss of an entire German army, but also marked a strategic shift in momentum on the Eastern Front, with the Soviets now on the offensive. As the spring thaw of 1943 set in, both sides began to prepare for their next moves. The Germans, determined to regain the initiative and secure a decisive victory, focused on rebuilding their forces and planning a new offensive. Hitler's strategic vision was centered around capturing the industrial heartland of Ukraine and splitting the Soviet Union's defenses, aiming to encircle and destroy large portions of the Red Army in the process. This led to the conception of Operation Zitadel, or Citadel, an ambitious plan to attack the Soviet salient around Kursk, a city strategically located in western Russia. The Kursk salient, a bulge in the Soviet lines, was seen as a vulnerable point where a concentrated German attack could split the Soviet defenses and create a breach that would be impossible to close. Meanwhile, the Soviets were busy reinforcing their positions and preparing for the inevitable German assault. Under the guidance of General Zhukov, who had risen to prominence after his successful defense of Moscow and his role in the victory at Stalingrad, the Red Army worked tirelessly to fortify its defenses around Kursk. The Soviets were well aware of the German intentions, thanks in part to intelligence gathered from partisan activities behind enemy lines and signals intercepts, which provided them with valuable insights into German operational planning. This intelligence allowed the Soviets to prepare a series of defensive measures, including the creation of deep layers of fortified positions, utilizing the natural terrain to their advantage, and preparing a series of defensive belts designed to slow down and bleed the German army. The Soviet defensive strategy was built around creating a series of concentric circles of defense, with each circle consisting of multiple layers of trenches, bunkers, and minefields. The core of this defense was the Central Front, led by General Konstantin Rokossovsky, whose forces were tasked with holding the northern flank of the salient, and the Voronezh Front, under General Nikolai Fyodorovich Batutin, responsible for the southern sector. These preparations were complemented by a massive buildup of Soviet air power and armor aimed at countering the German panzer divisions. The Soviets had learned from their previous battles with the Germans and had developed new tactics, including the use of anti-tank rifles and mines, to counter the German armor. On July 5, 1943, the German Wehrmacht launched Operation Zitadel, unleashing a massive artillery barrage that shook the earth beneath the feet of Soviet soldiers manning the defenses around Kursk. The attack began at 4:30 a.m., as waves of German infantry and panzers poured into the Soviet salient, seeking to break through the layered defenses and achieve a decisive victory. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the acrid smell of smoke and the deafening roar of gunfire. The northern sector of the battlefield saw the German Ninth Army, led by General Walter Model, launch a ferocious assault against the Soviet Central Front. The Germans employed their newest tank, the Panther, in an attempt to crush the Soviet defenses, but they were met with fierce resistance from the dug-in Soviet troops. As the battle raged on, the Soviets unleashed a maelstrom of artillery fire, pouring shells onto the advancing German columns and inflicting heavy casualties. The ground trembled beneath the feet of the soldiers as the earth was torn apart by the relentless barrage. In the southern sector, the German 4th Panzer Army, under the command of General Hermann Huth, clashed with the Soviet Voronezh Front in a frenzy of steel and fire. The Germans made significant gains on the first day, pushing deep into the Soviet defenses and threatening to break through the lines. However, the Soviets held firm, employing their anti-tank rifles and mines to devastating effect against the German panzers. The sound of screaming tanks and the staccato burst of machine gun fire filled the air as the two armies clashed in a maelstrom of chaos. As the battle entered its second day, the fighting intensified, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The Germans continued to push forward, but the Soviets refused to yield, employing a tactic known as elastic defense, where they would give ground in some areas only to counterattack and retake lost positions. This tactic allowed them to conserve their strength while bleeding the German army dry. The Soviet commanders, aware of the German penchant for bold, decisive actions, had carefully prepared a series of defensive strongpoints, each one designed to funnel the German attackers into killing zones where they could be cut down by withering artillery and small arms fire. On July 7, 1943, the Germans launched a massive armored assault, code-named Operation Kutuzov, in an attempt to break through the Soviet defenses once and for all. The attack was led by the SS Panzer Corps, which had been held in reserve until this point. As the German tanks rolled forward, they were met with a wall of fire from the Soviet anti-tank guns and artillery. The Germans suffered crippling losses, with hundreds of tanks destroyed or disabled in a matter of hours. The once proud panzers, their armor cracked and smoldering, lay strewn about the battlefield like shattered toys. As General Zhukov observed the unfolding battle, he noted that the enemy's plan was to break through our defenses with a powerful armored fist, but we were prepared for them. He went on to say, our defense was like a fortress, with many layers and strongpoints, and the enemy was unable to breach it. The Soviet commander's words were laced with a quiet confidence, born of careful planning and a deep understanding of the German military mindset. Zhukov knew that the Germans would stop at nothing to achieve their objectives, but he also knew that his own army was ready, willing, and able to defend their homeland against all comers. The Battle of Kursk had become a war of attrition, with both sides trading blows and suffering heavy losses. The Germans continued to push forward, but their advances were slow and costly, while the Soviets held firm, waiting for the opportune moment to launch a counterattack that would change the course of the battle forever. As the sun beat down on the battlefield, the air grew thick with heat and tension, the outcome hanging precariously in the balance. As the battle raged on, the Soviet counterattack, code-named Operation Rumyantsev, was launched on August 3, 1943, with the aim of encircling and destroying the German forces in the Kursk salient. The Soviet army made significant gains, pushing the Germans back and retaking key positions. The air was thick with tension as artillery fire rained down on both sides, the smell of smoke and sweat hanging heavy over the battlefield. The German army, depleted and exhausted, was unable to withstand the relentless Soviet onslaught. Their defenses were breached and their lines began to waver. On August 23, 1943, the Soviets recaptured the city of Kharkov, a crucial industrial and transportation hub, marking a major turning point in the battle. The city's liberation was met with jubilation from the local population, who had suffered greatly under German occupation. As Soviet troops marched through the streets, they were greeted as heroes, their faces etched with relief and exhaustion. The Battle of Kursk ultimately concluded on August 25, 1943, with the Soviet army emerging victorious, having inflicted catastrophic losses on the German Wehrmacht. The Germans had lost over 500,000 men, 2,900 tanks, and 1,400 aircraft, while the Soviets had suffered around 800,000 casualties. The battle marked a decisive shift in the balance of power on the Eastern Front, as the Soviet army began to push the Germans back towards their own borders. In the aftermath of the battle, the Soviet army continued to advance, liberating large swaths of Ukrainian and Belarusian territory from German occupation. As they pushed forward, they encountered scenes of unimaginable destruction, burned-out villages, ravaged cities, and countless civilian casualties. The human cost of war was laid bare, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of conflict. The Battle of Kursk had dealt a crushing blow to the German war machine, and it would never fully recover from the losses suffered during those fateful summer months. As historian John Erickson noted, the Battle of Kursk was the death knell of the German army on the Eastern Front, It marked the beginning of the end of the Third Reich's territorial ambitions. The battle had exposed the weaknesses of the German military, highlighting their inability to adapt to the changing nature of modern warfare. The battle was commemorated in Russia with monuments, museums, and annual ceremonies, serving as a reminder of the country's proud military heritage. As General Georgy Zhukov, the Soviet commander-in-chief during the battle, once said, "The Battle of Kursk was a great victory for our people, a victory that will be remembered for generations to come." The legacy of the Battle of Kursk extends far beyond the confines of World War II history. It marked a turning point in the development of modern warfare, as it showcased the importance of combined arms tactics, strategic planning, and logistical coordination. The battle also had significant implications for the post-war world order, as it contributed to the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany and the emergence of the Soviet Union as a superpower. One of the key factors that contributed to the Soviet victory was their ability to adapt and innovate on the battlefield. They had learned valuable lessons from their earlier defeats at the hands of the Germans, and they applied those lessons to great effect during the Battle of Kursk. The use of armored formations, air support, and artillery bombardments all played a crucial role in breaking through German lines. In addition, the Soviet Army's logistical capabilities were significantly improved, allowing them to maintain a steady supply of troops, equipment, and ammunition throughout the battle. The Battle of Kursk serves as a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of conflict, but also of the resilience and determination of those who fight for their countries and their freedom. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.